Hi everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Tina and I am the Capability Building Coordinator for Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand. Connecting Up is a not-for-profit organisation. Our purpose is to help fellow not-for-profits leverage the digital world to positively impact their communities. The digital world is expanding beyond IT, software, hardware and digital marketing to new innovative service delivery and measuring social impact. Connecting Up believes that not-for-profits with the right tools and skills can and do achieve great things for their communities. We have a long history of affordable software, hardware, educational events, and group consulting. We partner with over 40 organisations to deliver high-quality products and services, specifically meeting the unique needs of the not-for-profit sector. I'd like to welcome you all to the webinar Office 365 Implementation Considerations, which will be presented by Marcus Harvey from Info Exchange. We'll start with a little bit of housekeeping. All lines are muted, so if you have any technical issues, please type it into the questions box on your webinar panel and I'll be able to assist you through there. If you do have any questions during the session, please also type it into the questions box and Marcus will answer them in the Q&A section at the end of the webinar. Please note that your comments and questions will not appear to the entire group. If you are on a Wi-Fi connection and have multiple programs open, this can sometimes affect the quality of the audio and video of the webinar. If possible, please close all other programs to help you have the best experience. Please note that the webinar is being recorded and a link to the recording and the slides will be sent to you within 2 business days after the webinar ends. Before we start, I'd also like to remind you that there will be a short survey at the end of the webinar. We'd appreciate it if you took a few minutes to provide us with some feedback on today's webinar. That's all from me for now. I'll pass it over to Marcus to get things started. Thanks, Marcus.
Thanks so much, Tina, and look, welcome everyone. I just put the video on for a second so you can see me. Really excited to have you here for this Office 365 Implementation Considerations webinar. Info Exchange has been working with Office 365 for about 5 years now, and as a non-profit ourselves, we work exclusively with the non-profit sector, and so we're really familiar with both the challenges and the opportunities in making Office 365 work for non-profits. I'll drop the video and get started. So I've been working in the non-profit sector for around about 15 years and another 15 years before that in the tech sector. So I have seen it all. And what I'm keen to do today is help you understand how can you make Office 365 implementation a success and what are some of the key things that you need to consider. One of the things that I think I want to re-emphasize is the fact that Office 365 is changing all the time. So if you thought about implementing it 3 years ago and now you're ready to do it, a lot of the features and functions have changed and the way you do it has evolved over that time period. So it's really important to think about where you're at as an organization and where Office 365 is at, because it's a service area that always continues to expand and change, and make sure you take that into account in your implementation design and planning. In terms of the agenda today, what we're going to do is work through a range of different areas. So first of all, I just want to talk a little bit about Office 365 options and inclusions. Second, I want to talk about why use Office 365, because it's such a broad suite that if you're not really clear on why you're using it and what's driving you, you'll disperse your energy and you won't get good value and staff will get confused. Then I want to talk about each of the key applications in a bit more detail and how you might migrate each of those components. So Exchange, SharePoint, Yammer, Skype, Teams, those sorts of things, just so that you can think about the different options there and what you need to keep in mind. Then I'm going to talk about the business case, because while you can absolutely get the E1 planned in Office 365 free of charge, it does take effort to implement. And often you'll need to do upgrades, or it makes sense to do upgrades as part of the implementation process, and there may be cost associated with that. So being clear on why you're doing it and what the benefits will be for the organization will really help you focus on the important bits and make sure that you get the value out of it for the effort you've put in that journey. We're going to talk about infrastructure considerations, because while Office 365 is a lovely cloud product, there are still key things you need to think about from your infrastructure side of things. We're going to talk about privacy and security, our top tips for success, resources, and then pause and give a bit of time for everyone to ask questions. So that's the agenda for today. And moving straight into it, I want to talk first of all about the main Office 365 options from a non-profit perspective. So there's 3 core options that we see the majority of people taking. Business Essentials and E1, they're 2 slightly different options. They're both available as a donation, and they don't include the desktop applications, but they include Exchange for email on your back end, calendaring contacts. They include OneDrive for personal file storage. They include SharePoint for organizational file storage, Skype for business, and Teams for instant messaging, collaboration, audio and video conferencing. So at no cost, you can get an unlimited number of users on those base services, together with web versions of Word and Excel, terabyte per user of OneDrive storage, 50 gigs of mail storage, online meetings, hub for teamwork, social network, and other elements. So what we find is that quite a few nonprofits are comfortable going with just this base version and purchasing Office desktop applications where they need them from Connecting Up or TechSoup New Zealand as a standalone desktop license. And that can be a very cost-effective way for licensing your organization. The core services are available for free, so you can't complain about that. And then it's just a matter of migrating your users and your staff into that. The next step up is the Business Premium, and that's $4.10. That's non-profit price ex GST per user per month. So Business Premium is limited to 300 users. That has everything inside the Office Business Essentials, plus the following desktop applications for users. So that's Word, Outlook, PowerPoint, Excel, OneNote, Access Publisher. And every user can use that on up to 5 PCs or Macs. And it also gives you the ability to download and install those applications on tablets and phones as well. And what we find is that organizations that have a large number of mobile or geographically dispersed staff find that Business Premium is a very valuable option for them, because it removes that need of keeping Office upgraded themselves. Users can download, and it's auto upgraded as part of the Office 365 application suite. And so no longer do you have to go out and regularly upgrade, or as part of PC replacement, buy new Office updates as part of that. So that can be really useful, and particularly if you need to be able to use the full features of Word on your tablet or your Android or iPhone. So that's the next step up. Enterprise 3 is where you need to go if you need to go absolute for any organization with more than 300 staff. And we also find that many smaller organizations pick Enterprise 3 because it's a comparatively small jump over Business Premium, about $2 per month per user, or what's that, $24, $25 per annum. But it does allow some more sophisticated options. So it gives you things like better compliance and auditing for discovery, mailbox hold, and legal search. It also gives you better data analytics and business intelligence services to be able to analyze your organization's information. And what we find is that that's really useful for organizations that are trying to understand the impact of their services. And what they'll do is they'll connect up their core client management system into the Office 365 Business Intelligence Suite, and then start to analyze to understand how does the number of clients that they see over time change, how does their impact change over time, what are their outcomes, and does that change by client cohort. And some of those more sophisticated tools, even smaller non-profits of 10, 15, 20 staff are finding really valuable because they can be quite nimble and quite innovative with some of those solutions. So they're the three main Office 365 non-profit options that we see organizations using for their staff. I will make the comment that Microsoft allows you to mix and match everything and take just core components. So if you only wanted if you wanted everyone to be on Business Essentials, but you wanted the BI components of Enterprise 3, that's an easy add-on that you can add into the Business Essentials. So they're just the three main options. You can go nuts, if you like, with your mixing and matching on an individual user basis. So you can have 20 users on your Business Essentials or your E1, you can have 10 users on your Business Premium, and you can have other users on your Enterprise 3 or more sophisticated. There are more sophisticated options, so Enterprise E5 actually gives you telephony for video conferencing, and there's now also options for telephony replacement as well. But in terms of your implementation consideration, the first question is, how do I license the core user base? Am I going with Business Essentials? Am I going with Business Premium? Am I going with Enterprise 3 or E3? And who are the variances or the differences? So who needs something more? Who should go away if I've got a lot of part-time staff? Should they move back to a different option? So that's the first big consideration. What do you actually need for the vast majority of your staff? Moving on to the next slide. I just wanted to talk a little bit about the E3 plan, primarily because we often get a lot of questions both after the webinars and when we're working individually with nonprofits. So for $6.10 per user per month, some organizations will purchase those E3 licenses either to access the Office Pro Plus desktops installed locally by each user, and that's using a pretty snazzy click-to-run technology, which the more geographic dispersed you are, the more value that is, so you don't have to have tech staff visit and upgrade Office individually. It's the mobile apps. The more you have staff out and about in the field, either using a Windows and using tablets, particularly iPads or Android tablets, that gives you that advanced editing for Word, Excel, and PowerPoint. The advanced email, what we do find is that more and more of the nonprofits we're working with are looking for some advanced email solutions around archiving or keeping a copy of all emails that come in or out of their organization for audit and compliance purposes. And so the E3 plan comes with some of those advanced email services, as well as really nice search and discovery options so that you can search across your whole Office 365 tenant to find particular information on what users have been working on, particularly if you need to undertake investigations to understand particular issues or to understand what's happening if there's been a potential breach. The last one, which I did talk about on the previous slide, was the business intelligence options. And the more you're trying to understand your impact, the more some of those services to create dashboards that allow staff and service delivery managers to interact with their information and understand both the impact, the throughput, and the activities of the organization. That's a very, very valuable service. As we'd mentioned, Office 365 Pro Plus 2016 or 2019 is also available through Connecting Up to TechSoup as a one-off purchase, and that comes with software assurance for a 2-year period, and that's very valuable if you're not going to go either with the Business Premium or E3 option. Moving forward, I want to talk a little bit about why use Office 365, because being clear on the purpose is absolutely essential to a successful rollout. So what we find is that when we've been working with nonprofits over the past sort of 5 years or so, half decade, these are a lot of the reasons that organizations are looking to move on to Office 365. It can be to reduce risk because it reduces the needs on the top left of that of the diagram, because it can reduce the need for backup. It can improve password security. It can improve email filtering and security. It can also give reduce your on-premise servers, and so that then means that you've got less hardware that's likely to fail that you need to maintain, and have those more complex or sophisticated Exchange server engineers should something go wrong. One of the second key reasons we see people moving into Office 365 is because they want to improve their admin and management. So booking of resources and rooms, and moving away from paper-based processes and forms and developing those in an electronic form with workflow associated with it. And allow those efficient processes online, which can work irrespective of where someone is actually working, whether they're working at home from the day. It can work across multiple locations. No longer do you have to push forms across the organization, paper-based forms across the organization, or for business intelligence and dashboarding. It can also, we've seen a lot of organizations say, part of the way we want to work in the future is to collaborate independent of boundaries on the right-hand side. And so we want to collaborate on documents, share contacts, have discussions, shared calendars, completely independent of current team structures, where the physical desks are located, who's on which level or who's in which location, so that we can create that ability to work on a particular issue, collaborate on about a client, or to develop a submission or report across the organization. And so the collaboration tools within Office 365 really offer a lot of value there. Client communication being one of the third or the fourth key area, around email, storage of information, partner portals for information sharing, and Skype for Business for video conference. Mobility is probably what we're seeing as becoming the #1 value that organizations are saying, I need to move to Office 365. More and more nonprofits are trying to work outside of the office rather than have the majority of their staff bound to a desk for the majority of the day. So accessing documents out of the office, whether that be offline or through the web, using information with mobile apps, power apps and other areas, as well as being able to access it from any device independent of location, is one of the key features that we're seeing organizations embrace as a priority in their implementations. And the last one being staff communication. So allowing staff to get that point of presence and instant messaging, group discussion boards, and giving an organizational intranet or knowledge base to share information effectively is the other key thing that organizations are doing as a reason for moving to Office 365. One of the big challenges with Office 365 is there's so many different areas of it, is being clear what you're using and why. So we've just listed on the left-hand side some different purposes as well as some of the applications that you can use. So what we're seeing is if you want to collaborate, Teams is in document management for small teams. There's a comparatively new, it's only been out a year or two, application called Teams, which is a fantastic tool and brings it all together. I'll talk a little bit more about that in a second, to collaborate around Office 365. Discussions in groups, again, you can use Yammer or Teams. Now, it's important to be really clear where there's multiple options, which one of those you choose so that you don't confuse staff. For intranet, SharePoint is a very valuable tool to actually build and deliver that. For business intelligence and reporting, it's Power BI. Messaging and video conferencing, it's Skype for Business / Teams. For individual storage of documents, it's OneDrive for Business. Forms and databases, simple databases, and online workflow, you'd use SharePoint. Accessing emails, we recommend, but you can also use the native, the Outlook mobile app. And for project management, there's Office 365 Planner and SharePoint. So there's a lot of different purposes that you can bring Office 365 to bear. What's really important is thinking through what you're trying to achieve and picking the right tool and not trying to do too much for your staff at once to get them confused. But when you're clear about why you want to use Office 365, it's very helpful to be clear on what the business case is. So if you're clear on what the case is, you can then get the funding to support any upgrades that might be required. And you can also say, here's the value that I've delivered, and focus on delivering that rather than getting sidetracked on all the other options you might be able to do with Office 365. So the top 5 areas that we've seen organizations build strong business cases for are to reduce or eliminate server upgrades and refreshes. More and more organizations are moving completely into the cloud within an Office 365 environment. Video conferencing and teleworking to reduce travel and meeting times. That can be really valuable, particularly if you've got a geographically dispersed organization. Defending against hardware failure is the third key reason, so that you don't need to have backup servers or solutions in the event, unfortunate event of some type of hardware failure or disaster. Collaboratingly effectively is the fourth, to get efficiency across the organization and break people out of their team silos and create that single source of truth. With Office 365, it's much easier to store files in a shared location and stop people storing stuff on their desktop, which is then inaccessible to the majority of the organization. So being clear on why you're doing Office 365 and what benefit you're trying to deliver to the organization is a really critical implementation consideration to make sure that your implementation is a success. But there's still a lot to do, and I suppose I wanted to talk through a little bit about how we see organizations generally implementing Office 365 to make sure you don't either start and come into this lost, confused and perplexed stage, or if you're at the early stages and feeling this way, to give you the starting roadmap to make sure that you've got some clarity on what the best path forward is. In terms of how we see organizations staging the implementation of Office 365, they will generally go through a 5 to 10 stage process. And there's 7 typical stages that I've outlined here, along with other areas. So the majority of organizations that we've worked with and we've seen go through, and there's probably been 150 over the last 5 years that we've worked with, so it's a reasonable number of nonprofits. First stage is work out what you're doing and why you're doing it. Get approval for that. If there's funding required, there's definitely time required, even if there's no funding. Might be a formal business case, might be an informal business case. So that's the first thing. Get the program approved, get the resources allocated. Number 2 is review what you've got, and obviously do a more detailed scoping activity and prepare your environment. What we do find is that for many nonprofits, their environment may not be really well known, or may have grown higgledy-piggledy over a period of 5 to 10 years. There might be old accounts, shared calendars that are no longer used. The organisation might be unclear how many PCs or desktops there are and what version of Windows or Office they're currently using. So that review, understanding what you've currently got within your organisation, scope the transition. You've got to upgrade 5, Office 2010 versions into Office 2019, or you don't have to upgrade any. You need to upgrade to Windows 10. You don't have to upgrade anything. Getting clear and preparing and cleaning your environment a little bit is really key to making sure that your implementation of Office 365 is a success. If you're going to tackle moving files into SharePoint or Teams or OneDrive, cleaning up wherever your files are at the moment and making sure you don't just take a big mess is absolutely critical to making sure it's going to be a success. Often what we find is having a pilot demo or testing for key staff to get their buy-in and to make sure people are comfortable with the journey on is a really important third stage. If you're only doing, for instance, Exchange and there's no desktop change, and so a lot of it's just the back end to reduce risk and reduce cost, there may not be much of a need for any sort of demos, but making sure that you know what's going to happen and can go through that process successfully is key. Fourth stage is getting your users are recognised by Office 365, getting the tenant established, confirming your non-profit status, and many organisations will upgrade an internet connection, probably 70% as a rough order of magnitude. And so that makes, is all about linking any local domain you have into the Office 365 tenant, and making sure that synchronization, or if you're not synchronizing, however you're maintaining the access between the on-premise and 365 works effectively. Then usually it's an email migration and Teams for instant messaging and video conferencing. Then it's OneDrive, SharePoint or Teams design. So there's usually a bit of design work in moving files before you then move your files and decommission local storage areas with appropriate training, change management to help take staff on the journey, because file moving is great, but it is a more significant change for staff. Other things that we see organizations do is rolling out OneDrive, Yammer, video, business intelligence, telephony, and planner. I think what I say later on is do the bits that add the most value first, right? So, be clear on, is it file storage, is it email, is it instant messaging and video conferencing, is it business intelligence? Do those bits earlier rather than later so that you start to get real value for the organization, and do things in stages so you're not doing everything at once across the whole organization and then you end up getting things half done. So that's a common project staging. If you're not sure where to start with this and adjust it where it makes sense and where you've got a good reason. I want to talk through now briefly some of the different migration options for each of the different core services. So you remember that there's a range of backend services, Exchange Online, SharePoint, Teams, etc. I want to talk through some of the migration options reasonably quickly, just so you've got some high-level understanding of, I'm this type of organization, I'd do this, or this is what I consider for each of the different service cutovers that Office 365 can provide and which you might find valuable. So for Exchange Online or email migration, there is 5 core migration options: an Outlook client-based migration option. It's suitable for small organizations, less than 30 PCs. Non-tech staff can do it, but it's fairly manual and fairly time consuming, right? But it's also fairly cost effective because you could do this with non-tech staff. And IMAP migration is the second option. It supports a wide range of platforms. It's email only. It doesn't support calendar, contacts, or task migration. But this is a good option, particularly if you're moving off Gmail or another non-Microsoft mail system. No need to use this if you're using an Exchange server or something like that. An Exchange cutover migration is good for a fast, immediate cutover. So this happens generally over a weekend. You're limited to around about 5 to 10 gigabytes per hour. Over a weekend, you've got sort of 48 to 60 hours of available time when staff aren't working. So that limits the amount of data you need to transfer. But it's a good, fairly automated solution. No staging's required, works well as a rule of thumb between 30 and 100 users, but it is big bang. It's bang, you're across. You need technical server expertise to get that synchronization working. There's a range of good third-party migration tools. And they can be really good for some hosted email servers if you're on those. So Telstra, external Exchange, we've had quite a number of medium-sized clients that their MSP, a managed service provider, has been hosting, and for whatever reason the MSP isn't able to support a cutover migration. So third-party migration tools can be a really useful vehicle to streamline that. And particularly if your server's not very reliable or it's very old, this can also be a really good option in terms of buying those third-party migration tools. Hybrid migration is good for large organizations. It's good for long-term coexistence. We've got, if you need to migrate, 1,000, 3,000, or even just 200 users over a period of weeks or months, but that is fairly technically complex, and there's some fairly strong security requirements for on-site maintenance. So most complex, most flexible, most suitable for large organizations is hybrid. So that's email cutover. Obviously, I'll take questions on all these later. Skype for Business was the next key thing that I just wanted to briefly touch on. And you may remember 3 slides ago when I talked about common project staging. Instant messaging is often done at the same time as email migration because it's an easy win. So big comments around Skype for Business, Link and Teams actually. So new tenants, it's no longer called Skype for Business, it's now called Teams. Number one is review your internet connections. If you don't have decent internet connections, don't expect to be able to video conference. From a Skype for Business, you need to use headsets for audio conferencing. We see a lot of organizations, you may remember when I put the video on, I'll do it again at the end, I'm using a headset. Don't expect video conferencing to work in an open plan environment. Don't expect it to work without headsets. It just won't work. It's as bad as using a conference phone in an audio plan in an open plan environment. Consider enable external contact sharing, because what that will do will allow you to to connect with all the other nonprofits in Office 365 and video conference with them. Really useful. We use that all the time. There's the option for certain users, if that's of value, of getting dial-in conference numbers for audio and video conferencing with the E5 license. I didn't cover that at the start, but we certainly have a large number of nonprofits have key staff get that E5 license. That can be really useful. And this is brand new. Within the last 3 months, our view has changed, and Skype for Business is now a viable option if you've got decent internet connections, or happy to upgrade to that, able to upgrade to that. It is a viable replacement for telephony. So you've still got to connect in, SIP trunks, etc. So it's fairly technical into the back end, but whereas 2 years ago we were advising people, if they wanted to go down this path, to put their own on-premise Skype for Business servers in, this is now a viable telephony replacement option for organizations, which is really exciting. It gives you unified communications, gives you the ability to access your phone from anywhere. Real quickly, SharePoint Online, and we do full webinars based only on SharePoint. So this is a 30-second overview only. Come to the, I think it's the next one, Tina will confirm at the end, on SharePoint in more detail. So SharePoint Online is great for a company intranet, for large organizations, can be used as a file server replacement for smaller organizations, but you do still need to think about, do I need local storage for large files? It allows you to go online with your forms and your paper documentation if you want to put that into an online workflow environment, and it allows teams and allows you to develop team and project sites for collaboration. But the migration into SharePoint Online is generally something that requires a fair bit of change management and hand-holding for staff. There is change for users, and that's the thing we usually focus most strongly on, because that's the thing that most often causes this to fail. So if you're really clear why you're using SharePoint, you think about the sophistication of your staff, then allow that and then take that into consideration in the rollout. Teams is a comparatively new, that's not true actually. It's been around for about 18 months, 2 years. It's really come into its own around about 6 months ago, and we've been much more comfortable recommending it to our clients. In the early stages, it was if you tried Teams 12, 18 months ago, it's evolved dramatically since then. That's my big comment. And Teams is great because it brings a range of different elements together into one, if you like, wrapper, and makes it really easy for organizations to work effectively within a team environment. Instant messaging, group chat, file sharing, and if you're deploying, if you sign up for Office 365 today, you actually don't get Skype for Business anymore. You use Teams, has all the functionality that Skype for Business used to have. So Microsoft are rolling changes through around that space. And so it's a really nice wrapper that brings together instant messaging, group chat, file sharing, calendars, discussion boards, etc., to pull things into one space and allow teams to operate really effectively. Can talk more about Teams if people have questions later. I want to cover really quickly, just looking at time, I'm not going to spend a lot of time. Moving to the cloud does still give you, there is some infrastructure considerations you need to think about. And how do you link what is on-premise into what's in the cloud, because you want everything to work seamlessly. This slide just covers some key things to think about to make sure in your implementation you've thought about things and it's going to be able to work well. Internet connectivity, I stated on slide 2 or 3 that about 70% of organizations upgrade their internet as part of moving to Office 365. This is just a quick snapshot of, there's no one size fits all. Sometimes I get asked, so Marcus, what size internet should I have to do everything I want to be able to do? And the short answer is, it depends on what you want to do and how many staff are at that site. So just as a simple example, single user at home, ADSL 2 or 3G, if it's a reasonable single, should work fine. If you've got an office of 30 staff, just going down to the fourth or so row there, you're using VoIP, and you've got VPNs coming in, and then you need to think much more deeply about what you need, particularly if you've got hosted applications like finance or something in the cloud. So, based on with the pressure you're putting on the internet and how important laggy internet is, if you're trying to do audio, for instance, you absolutely need to think far more deeply about your internet connection, whether you need quality of service or whether you need an MPLS network. So there's something that you need to consider. What I do want to spend a couple of minutes on is security. Our view is Office 365 can be significantly more secure than what you've got at the moment. But if you don't think about it, it could be far less secure. So our starting position is you should design for security from day one. The great thing about Office 365 is it allows your staff to access information from anywhere with an internet connection. That's a blessing and a curse, because it can make your information a target as well. And if you've got weak passwords or a poor culture, or staff just have the default password of password01 and never change it, I will say there is a 95% likelihood within 12 months someone will guess your password, a password 01 password, for instance. And so the first thing that we recommend is just sit back and think about your security culture. Within your organization, does everyone use a password 01 password, or do they have strong complex passwords? Within your organization, do your staff understand how to spot a phishing email? Do they understand how to look at where the sender's from? If before they click on a link, how to tell where that link is taking them to? Does it look like a dodgy website? Does it look like a legit website? Do you have any documentation or policy to keep your staff secure and informed about how to handle things appropriately? This is actually nothing to do with Office 365 and just good technology practice, but we do recommend this be thought through before any Office 365 implementation, simply because if you don't, you're at higher risk of having some sort of breach. The second thing is Microsoft cares about it as well. Microsoft actually make 53 EMS E3 licenses. That's a bit of a tongue twister for me. That if you buy them for nothing, nice good price, and implement, it gives you really nice monitoring and usage-based reporting, risk-based reporting to keep an eye on your environment. Far better than anything you could have in your local server environment. Far more intuitive, some real smarts around machine learning to work out where the risks are and where the risks aren't. But they actually need to be purchased for nothing, 50-free if you're a non-profit, and implemented and used. You also should consider Intune for mobile device management. Intune comes with the EMS E3 license. The third thing is, we say this because we think it's really important to think about. Consider rolling out multi-factor authentication for everyone. Multi-factor authentication means that when you're logging in from a new location or a new PC, there's a second path or mechanism to authenticate you, the easiest one is a text to your staff's mobile phone. So that it's an additional layer of protection. If this isn't viable, and it isn't for quite a number of the organizations we work with, you should consider blocking sign-in to Office 365 from all countries except Australia, and deploy multi-factor authentication to all high-risk individuals, e.g. executives, administrators, anyone that travels overseas. You get that ability to do block sign-ins from overseas with the EMS E3 licenses that are available for free. They're not available in the base Office 365 E1 SKU, but they are available if you apply the EMS licenses, that functionality. All right, moving on. I can spend a whole day talking about security, but they're my top tips. Or most important things to think about. So, for a successful implementation, 10 quick tips before I wrap up and open to questions. Number one, design for security from day one. Just covered that. I'm reinforcing it because it's really important to us. Much easier to design from day one than to retrofit or fix it up afterwards. Number two, Azure, and I haven't talked about this in detail, but I want to mention it just in case organizations, just so that for those organizations that go, oh, this is worth thinking about, they consider it. There's a feature called Azure Active Directory Domain Services, which effectively allows organizations with Windows 10 PCs, if they're not huge, would be our recommendation, to operate really effectively without a server. Management capabilities are a little bit reduced. You need some Intune skills, but it allows you to no longer do I have to patch my servers to keep it secure. No longer do I need Windows Server expertise. So it's a really nice option if you're a smaller organization, have Windows 10 or can commit to upgrading to Windows 10, and allows you to operate from anywhere effectively connected to the cloud without VPNs. So that's point two, worth considering if you fall within that category. Number three, implement the most valuable areas of Office 365 first. As I've said earlier, often Exchange and Skype for Business on our teams. Other areas such as SharePoint and Business Intelligence can come later. Number four, explain the benefits to staff and support them through making the change. And that's a really important thing. The helping staff through the change process is critical to getting buy-in and getting people to use stuff. And what we do find is local champions are really important for many organizations, not all of them, but for many, in helping staff through that change process. People react a lot better to change if they've got someone that they can talk with. Hopefully in 3 years' time, video conferencing will be fine, but now what we find with many of our clients, someone local is really useful. 5, covered this a few times already, but I do reiterate it because this is one of the biggest failures we see when organizations come to us and saying my Office 365 doesn't work. Make sure your internet bandwidth and reliability is suitable. Number 6, apologies, I've got a numbering issue there. Number 6 is upgrade to Office 2016, 2019 on your PCs as part of that, as part of the rollout process. That's really useful primarily if you're moving your files into the cloud. If you're just doing Exchange, 2013 is fine. If you're on 2010, you're going to have to upgrade. But the later versions actually have a lot more user-friendly functionality and allow staff to work more efficiently, and it just reduces that user change challenge. 7, use a 365 expert if you need it to make the transition a success, particularly for data migrations if you're not confident with what you're doing, and to help with ongoing support and training. 8, Consider local storage if you work with large videos. So if you've got a marketing team that edits videos and you've got a mediocre internet connection, don't expect that to work in the cloud. 9, ensure each application you implement has a clear purpose and you support your staff and your organization through that journey. And 10, roll out in stages. There's lots of components. Don't try and do everything at once. The only thing I'll guarantee is you'll get stuck and you'll have troubles. Additional information on 365. There's the readiness assessments that we provide through the Connecting Up and TechSoup New Zealand website, which is a really useful starting base to give you a yellow, green, red. You're ready for Office 365. You've got some major work to do, and they're very cost effectively priced. We also run DIY workshops with Connecting Up if you've got tech staff that want to do it themselves with a little bit of hand-holding or guidance through a process. We do webinars all the time with Connecting Up, and including practical demonstrations of Office 365. I haven't shown you anything today. I've just talked about considering the implementation, and we obviously do implementation and migration services and advice, as well as SharePoint. There's also a link back to the Microsoft site. I'm going to hand back to Tina now for additional questions. Thanks, Tina.
Great, thanks, Marcus. We did have a few questions come through. The first one is from Annabelle. Do all users within an organisation need to be on the same type of licence?
Annabelle, no, they don't. You can mix and match to your heart's content. So we have many organisations that go, I'll take 20 of the donation E1 licenses, and I'll take only 2 E3 licenses. So you can mix and match.
Okay, the next one's from Julian. Why is the E3 plan adding $2.90 if it's available under the business premium plan for up to 300 users?
So the business premium plan is available. You can use that for up to 300 users. If you want either more than 300 users, or you want some of the features within E3, such as the advanced auditing, email business intelligence, that's why you'd purchase an E3 plan. So you can go either business premium for, I think it was $4.10, or you can do E3 for $6.10. Both of those include the desktop applications, Word, Outlook, and PowerPoint, etc. But E3 has additional features that may be of value. Does that answer the question?
I'll let Julian know. John wants to know, is there an electronic document management and record system included, or one that you can recommend that can be integrated? We're trying to go paperless and compliance is a big concern.
So document and records management, we see that used for a lot of different things. SharePoint is a great policies and procedures document management system. So you've got version control, you can set up approval workflows, those sorts of things, really good, right? And comparatively easy for a SharePoint designer to build within the SharePoint environment within Office 365. If you wanted, some government departments use things like TRIM, which is over the top in records management. Those sorts of things you can build within Office 365, but I wouldn't recommend it. So for simple records, policy documents, that type of records management absolutely can be built within Office 365 simply.
Okay, we've had a couple of people ask the same question. Is Windows 10 a prerequisite for Office 365, or can we use Windows 7?
You can absolutely use Windows 7. There is no need to use Windows 10.
Okay. And Carissa has asked, can Office 365 be used on a Mac, and what operating system doesn't need if you can? Do you have to run Windows for Mac to use Office 365?
You can absolutely use it on a Mac. Email, Outlook, OneDrive syncing, files on demand, all those features are available on a Mac. As I mentioned, I think it was slide 3, certain things like Microsoft Access and Publisher are not available on the Mac. but the vast majority of almost every other feature is.
Okay. Carissa has also asked what CRMs interface with Office 365.
There is, and that changes all the time. So I don't have a definitive list. We've got many clients that use Salesforce integrated with Office 365 as a CRM. We've got Dynamics, is obviously is wonderfully integrated because it's a Microsoft CRM with Office 365. There are other CRMs as well. That would be worth asking that integrate with Office 365, but that changes all the time and you'd need to ask the particular CRM vendor that you're interested in.
Okay. Gary says, I believe Windows 7 is not being supported from early 2020.
Yes, but that's a Microsoft thing. It's not to do with Office 365.
Okay. Now, John has asked, is OneDrive considered to be as reliable as Dropbox?
Gary, that's that is a good question. I'll answer it by saying OneDrive is dramatically more reliable than it used to be. We really struggled. Many of our clients struggled with OneDrive 2 years ago. OneDrive is now reliable and it's got the ability to sync certain files and not other files like Dropbox has had for a while. In my personal opinion, it's about as reliable as Dropbox or close to it from what I've seen. But to be honest, I haven't used Dropbox regularly for probably 12 months. We've had probably in the last 12 months, 3-4 clients move off Dropbox and onto OneDrive. All of them have been happy. None of them have said, I wish I had Dropbox back. However, Dropbox, whether or not it is as reliable for the way you use it, I would suggest you test it out and make your own decision.
Okay. Tony says, we have our email and calendars and contacts with G Suite, but a local domain controller and file server and use Office 2013 at present. Would we be better shifting everything to 365 or perhaps Azure with desktop Office linking to Cloud Docs on Google?
Look, my advice as a general rule of thumb is to pick one or the other. Don't mix your core. Don't mix Google and Microsoft unless you really, really have to. So my advice is either go with the G Suite option or go with the Office 365 option. Try not to mix and match only because there's not many organizations that mix and match that. And you end up intermittently finding weird troubles that are really hard to troubleshoot and no one's an expert in it. So I would advise you either to stay with G Suite or to move to Office 365. Don't do a G Suite with Azure. Don't do a Office 365 files with Gmail. So my advice is, unless there's some, wherever you can, pick one or the other productivity suite, either Google or Microsoft, and stick with it.
Okay. Carissa wants to know what the difference is between OneDrive and SharePoint.
So Microsoft is annoying, is the word I would use on this one. OneDrive means multiple things. So OneDrive is, first of all, a personal storage area for all staff. So for everyone. So, I have a personal storage, it used to be called a home drive in many organizations, a personal storage area for staff. So that's the first thing OneDrive is. And it gives you a terabyte of data, up to a terabyte free in that donation license. So it's the first thing OneDrive is. The second thing OneDrive is it allows you to synchronize files from the cloud down to your desktop. So that's OneDrive is actually two things. SharePoint is what we recommend organizations use to share files across the organization. So our recommendation is if you want to share files within a team, you use Team/SharePoint. If you want to store personal files for within or files that aren't shared, you use OneDrive for that. Hopefully that answers. SharePoint we recommend being used to store shared files. OneDrive we recommend being used to store files that are personal for me but still organizational related. And by the way, there's a OneDrive synchronization tool as well that muddies the waters a bit.
Okay, looks like that's all for questions today, Marcus. Was there anything that you wanted to add?
No, that's wonderful. Thank you so much, and thank you everyone. Best of luck with your Office 365 implementation journey. Please make sure you think about the stages and why you're doing it so that you make it a success. I think that it can add huge value to every organization, and it's just about going through that journey in the right way. And thanks, Tina, for having me. Really enjoyed it.
Thanks, Marcus, for presenting today, and thank you everyone for joining us. As Marcus mentioned before, we do have an Introduction to SharePoint webinar coming up on February 6th, also presented by Marcus. So I will send a link out to that webinar registration to everyone when I send the recording out. So I hope you've all learned a lot from this presentation and that we've answered all of your questions. If any questions do come to mind later and you have any feedback about the webinar, please send that through to events@connectingup.org and we will answer those questions offline. Don't forget that the recording will be available within 2 business days and a link will be sent to you, so keep an eye out on your inbox. Again, thank you for being with us. Enjoy the rest of your day and we look forward to seeing you all next time. Thanks, Marcus. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, Tina. Bye, everyone.